Hello there, people and listeners of the Hungry Podcast. I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome David Hieatt onto the podcast. David has very succinctly summed up your career, and I found it on your website. David is bankrupt at 16, thrown out of college at 18, joined Saatchi and Saatchi at 21, started Howies in 1995, sold it to Timberland, left, started the Do Lectures, started Hiut Denim Co. Your work has been, as I said before we hit the record button, been super inspirational to starting Hungry, especially Purpose. That was just such a great book. I implore our listeners to definitely check that out. Check out the Do Lectures. There's just a whole schleb of amazing different ways of thinking online. It's just such a great great tool and kit, and also your newsletter's absolutely fantastic. So look, I'm incredibly grateful for you coming on today, David.
Oh, my pleasure. I mean, it's good to have a chat, and if I could be of use to anyone, fantastic. If I can't, then not so good. But I'd like to be.
I'm absolutely sure you will be. So, where I'd love to start this conversation, the sort of the first kind of door I want to open, I suppose, is I was, as I said, I've been rereading a lot of your stuff in the last couple of weeks when I knew this interview was coming up. And I was actually having lunch in Hammersmith along the river about 2 weeks ago. And it was sort of like the sun was shining, and it's like the sea almost looks, it's not the sea, the river looks like it's kind of like metallic. It was like, It was just sparkling. It was gorgeous. The sun was coming through. And this sound came soaring past, and it was this, and like this speedboat just went like that and peeled up the river. And I'd read your article called I think it's Be a Speedboat.
Oh yeah.
And excuse my language, I sometimes swear, but I've always thought, like, fucking hell, like how do we say what the challenger brand mindset is? And your story of being a speedboat versus a shipliner. And what I took from that story was the shipliner is almost like the corporate. The shipliner loves meetings about meetings. The shipliner loves perfection. The shipliner loves to go slow. But seeing that speedboat zing right up the Thames really brought it to life. And it was just this ability to be nimble, to swim fast or go fast. But I'd love to know, like, why do you believe challenger brands should be speedboats versus shipliners, and maybe add some more color to that analogy, because I think it's beautiful.
Well, I mean, it is a strong analogy or metaphor, but the aspect really is, we're in a really fast world, and the ocean liner is really slow, right? It's slow to turn, to change, to stop, and I think one of the strengths of being like small and like a challenger brand is your ability to react and to be agile. And in a way, your biggest strength is your agility and ability to change really, really fast. And the important bit about the ocean liner and the speedboat is don't drop anchor, because and that's what the big ships have to do, right? They have to drop anchor, and they have to stay put, and they have to do things how they've always done them. And the ability to be fast and react is an incredible strength in a world that is completely changing almost on a daily basis. The one thing that shouldn't really change is your values and things that you believe in, but your ability to get to them can change doing so. For me, it's like being small now is such an incredible strength.
I think, as I said, there'll be a lot of people listening to this on a walk, on a drive, whatever, and they'll be thinking, oh, there's this kind of, I love the David and Goliath story really speaks to me, but there'll be a lot of people thinking, oh, we're too small, we don't have the budget, we don't have the muscle of the big boys, we don't have the strength. But when you said you don't have to drop anchor, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, the big ocean liner has to drop anchor. I mean, it has to stop, and it has to wait for the tide to turn so it can go into port. I mean, like, but this little cheeky little speedboat can zap around, like super fast. And the thing is, you want to, react to something in an incredibly powerful and fast way. The way to the future is to get there before others, and otherwise you're always going to be copying, and you're always going to be behind. And this little speedboat metaphor really is you going, hey, you can get to the future before anyone else. And if you can do that, your size doesn't really matter that much. And people get too obsessed with size, because right now in a fast changing world, what's the biggest benefit is like you being slow isn't the thing that you want, right? So you can react, you can get to the future before anyone else. And so therefore you don't need to be the biggest, but you need to be agile and responsive. And you need to like read signals where others can't even see anything. And so you suddenly go, what does that mean? What does that mean to me? What could that mean to my business? And how can I go and respond super fast? That's, this mindset now is the toolbox for a challenging brand. Is you've got a very fast changing world, and you don't actually want to be that big, because being big means you can't actually change super quick. And so the best armies are the fast armies, not the biggest armies. And so I think we just got this opportunity in time to go, like, what do you need actually a big budget for? The interesting thing about big budgets is you always have more people to be more worried about how you spend it. I mean, and when you have a really small budget, nobody gives a shit. And so you go, so you can place small bets, find out some data, and then go and place a bigger bet because you got some data. And placing small bets is a fantastic way to have ideas, go and check things out, go and see what the market actually thinks, as opposed to what the research companies tell you. So the market always decides, but you can have a cheeky little small bet and just go, oh, okay, I've actually learned something here. And I think we're in this extraordinary time for small brands where, like company of ones, company of tens, company of 20 people, they're all kind of small. But you can be incredible at being small. I mean, like the thing that I've always struggled with, and we were talking before we went on air, is really that thing of like this growth. Like on one level, we kind of want it just because everyone else wants it. And then you go like, why do you want it? Well, and I think about growth in perhaps different ways now. And I didn't always think this way. Whereas I think now you can grow influence as opposed to size. And so, and that's really about quality. How do you 10x your, creativity as opposed to 10x, the size of the company? And, we make jeans for, Rennie Rossetti in the past, but he became world's best chef by serving 45 people. And yet he's the world's best chef. In fact, he's won world's best chef 5 times. He's not allowed actually to enter anymore because it's not fair. He's so good. He keeps winning. It's ridiculous. So how you can look at your company now is like, because growth can be really stressful. I mean, like, and you think, oh, I've suddenly got all these mouths to feed, and then the company runs you, and you stop running it, and the amount of founders who just look like scared rabbits, because they are scared rabbits, because they just don't know actually how to. They've chased the wrong, thing, and then they climbed this mountain, and they got up to this top of this mountain, and they look around, and they just think, I don't even like the view. And then going, how do I get down from this mountain that I've climbed that I thought was someone else's mountain, and then in order to go get back to reality again, and it's a real, we're chasing other people's narratives, and I think for any founder listening to this right now is going like, what do you value the most? Oh, my time. Okay. Okay, obviously your health, your family's health, and your happiness, your ability to sleep, and how about growing those things, and your ability to look after your energy, your ability to look after your people's energy, and your ability to look after creativity. Like, I think we've been chasing the wrong thing. But I am interested, don't get me wrong, I am interested in 10x in my creativity, my ability to have ideas, my ability to be of influence in the world. But it's not always the thing that people really focus on. They just want to grow a number. They don't even know why. I want to grow 20% this year. And you go, why? Like, and they don't even know. Oh, because it's really good. Not all growth is good. It just means, what if you're growing something, a product that you don't actually love, and just go, I just want to sell more of this shit. You go, why? Like, so I mean, it's an argument. Like, I'm battling just like everybody else out there. We're all battling with the same argument. And do you know where I'm actually winning? Is when I got time to walk down to work. That's where I'm thinking I'm winning. Like when I'm in, now and again, I went for a year and a half, went swimming with a mate in the sea for a year and a half, almost nonstop. And when we're winning is where we're kind of in charge of our time, and our swimming pool is connected to America. And you suddenly going, actually, we're winning at that point. We're sort of time millionaires, time billionaires. And so that thing of founders, I think they're kind of getting themselves into a pickle because they're chasing this thing, this wannabe unicorn. Like, why? Like, don't you just want to be good? Don't you just want to be great at what you do? Why do you think being big at what you do is better than being amazing at what you do? I'd settle for amazing rather than big all day long.
1000%. I mean, there's just so much kind of insane wisdom in there, David. And I think it is so true. It's until really rereading your work, I was becoming obsessed with the podcast downloads, because I was like, more downloads equals potentially bigger sponsorships. I was like, I need to get bigger. And then, I do these supper clubs as well. And I was like, I need more people. We did one with about 25 to 30 people. It was way too big and it was shit. But it wasn't shit. It was all right. But we did one the other day with 12 to 14 and everyone was like, oh my God, that was so much better. One thing I want to go back to, and it's you said, you can get to the future before anybody else. I think what you said, that's that kind of speedboat analogy.
Mm.
One thing, and I've worked for in a challenger brand, which is actually a business that was selling into grocery and into like the supermarkets. And what happens is you have brands who start out when they're naive, and I think naivety is actually a superpower, and you're going along like a speedboat because you don't even know. It's almost like a fish doesn't know it's in water, right? So when you're starting out, you're so naive and you can just soar along. You can get out of the storm quickly. You can avoid the iceberg quickly. But then what happens is these brands, I really think a brand is like a baby growing up. So it starts as a toddler, it doesn't know, it's just super curious. And then it gets to the age of maybe, 13, which is like in the brand's life is maybe 2-3 years down the line. When they start getting insecure and they're like, oh, like a 13-year-old going to a disco, they suddenly realize, oh my God, I'm really insecure. This happens to brands. And then what happens, they need to bring in a corporate person. And I know this has happened so many times with people who listen to this podcast. They bring a corporate person in, which is basically maybe someone from a ship liner, and suddenly they lose all the thing that made them great. And they think they need experience. And I'd love to just kind of go back to this speedboat thing. Like, what are some of the maybe weekly, day-to-day principles of like, this is how we are a speedboat, and this is how we are not a ship liner that you implement at Hiut Denim?
So, I mean, that's a really good question. And the thing that I'm really interested in is obviously putting new ideas out there, and also like understanding that quite a lot of the ones that we're going to put out there will probably fail. Like 95% of them will fail, and I think that's an interesting culture, because I only need really one idea to work, to really change a lot. So, and we've put things out there like a history tag where on a pair of jeans, you would be able to. I was kind of obsessed by how jeans tell stories, and because I saw a pair of jeans in a Levi's store and it was 140 years old, and I just wanted to know the story behind it. What was its hardest day? What was its luckiest day? And the pair of jeans couldn't actually tell me that story at all. So, that story died with the owner, right? So, but the jeans were still there. And so we came up with this history tag thing, and it was a lovely idea. And so therefore people could, when those jeans went into a secondhand store one day, the stories would go with them too. It was a really lovely idea, except it didn't work. And I think for me is that thing of, the thing I'm fighting against is I think on the ocean liners, they're quite happy with what they've got. And they don't want to find the new way. They don't want to find anything else than actually sticking to their formula. And for me, a formula is a form of a trap. And so at some point you'll go, we always do it this way, we always do it this way, we always do it this way, until one day that way is completely out of time. The problem with the formula is it's really successful for a period of time, and then it completely falls off the cliff. And so that's why you see these amazing businesses, and then almost overnight disappear. And I think that culture, if you can create a culture where you just go like, should we try this? Can we try this? Can we try this? And they're small bets. And it can actually be quite like upsetting for people to go, oh, we'll try this thing, and this thing didn't work either. And once you've done 90 experiments and you find 90 ways that it doesn't work, is at some point you're going to do something that does work, and it can change. That's what getting to the future is you have to go and try stuff that there's no formula for it. There's no comparison where you go, oh, it's a bit like Airbnb, but it does this. That's not really an idea. That's just copying, and that's fine. But for me, the culture of experimentation, and an experiment really is something you'll try something, and you don't actually know if it's going to work. That's an experiment, because if there's no risk, there's no experiment. And so whereas the ocean liner is quite happy with exactly how it's doing things, it doesn't want to change anything. It wants to stay exactly as it is. I think the opportunity with small brands is to go, what if we did it like this? Oh, that didn't work. That was a disaster. You go, okay, well, what did we learn from that? And can we now go and iterate something else which would maybe work? And I think it's the culture, the metaphor really is about the cultures. Whereas, one is of sticking to the formula and don't change. And the other one is a formula where, we experiment, and one day we'll get to the future before anyone else, because we just tried shit. And we kept trying shit.
There's I was reading James Dyson's book.
Oh yeah.
The second one, Invention, I think it is. And he was talking about all the stuff they're doing with sort of strawberries and all this sustainable farming. And he was talking about staying, how like the word experience like almost sends shivers up his spine. And it's interesting because it's almost like you need experience to know and do better, but you almost need a huge, healthy balance of naivety to almost stay dumb and keep asking the dumb questions. So how do you stay? I don't mean this how do you stay naive as you get older?
The thing is, like, because there's no attachment to either the failure or the success, where you just try stuff. And I mean, the interesting thing with James Dyson, I mean, I only met him once, but I got asked to do his brand book, and I'm just going, what? I mean, he already had a successful brand. Nobody's going to read. I'm going to go and write a brand book that nobody's going to read. Like, who cares? And I couldn't quite understand why they wanted a brand book, but it was for Japan and America. But the reason actually I went and did it was because they showed me this poster of how many times he'd failed and iterated. Was it 5,126 times in order to get to the point of success? And at that point, I was just going, "Oh yeah, I'll write that brand book." Only because I just wanted to meet him, like
yeah.
And because I just loved that way of thinking, where you just go, "Well, I'll do this, then I'll do this, then I'll do this," and I think the mindset of openness to failure it's not like you want to attract failure. It's just you want to find experiments that don't work, because then you're closer to finding something that does work. And I think when there's no attachment either way, and you can do things where you're betting the farm, betting the farm gate, not the farm, each time. The problem with founders sometimes is they bet the complete farm on a hunch, and that can actually do well, but it can also 9 times out of 10 doesn't do well. And so, but if you bet the farm gate, you just go, okay, it's a farm gate, I'll bet another farm gate, then I'll bet another one. So it's small bets, and that's what I'm kind of really interested in, where you just go small bets. You find something, you go, oh, hang on, we got something here, maybe we need to go and pay more attention now.
It's obviously, I almost think of this kind of a process, and it's like you've got to hack at a lot of lead to stumble across the gold, and you've got to be okay with finding lead, and you've got to be okay with just seeing that there's a beautiful lesson and gift in every failure, I think. And I think failure is the wrong word. There needs almost to be a new word in the lexicon for these sort of speedboat challenger brand businesses. But it's fascinating. One thing I do want to talk about, and you can almost spot it a mile off, is when a brand has you could have the best speedboat in the world. It's like sat in the harbour, it's shining under the sunshine, it's red and blue, and it looks amazing. So that could be a brand with like great packaging, and then you've got actually a pretty decent product as well. And this podcast started more in the food and drink spheres, so there's lots of brands that have that. So they have great product, pretty good packaging as well, but they don't have the purpose. And the purpose is like the petrol. The purpose is the compass. It's the petrol. It's what gets you through the storms. And one of your quotes I read somewhere is, teams need to know what change they're going to make in this world. It is the fuel for the journey. It is the grit. It is the passion. It is the meaning. It is belief that there is, or soon will be, a better way to do this. No vision, no fuel, no culture, no team, no point. And I just, again, this is why I implore listeners to read your work, because it's brilliant. But you started Howies. What were some of the lessons? You said you'd sold Howies, and you said you'd felt broken, and you said you didn't want to run around that track twice. What were some of the lessons you took about purpose from Howies that you then applied at Hieatt?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because we're fed a story that, you go and build a company and then you sell it and you get a check and and you're successful, and that's one narrative that people are told, and for me, I didn't really feel that narrative. we were growing howies, and we'd never done a business before, and it was growing too fast, and we didn't really know what we were doing. And in essence, then we went and sold it, and then we got a big check, and you go, oh, thank you very much. But the mission was half complete. So it was kind of like, well, got some money, but we've only half got to where we even wanted to get to, and felt like we were really just starting that. And suddenly, so my learning was if you find something you love doing, then you have to find a way to keep doing it. And the notion of like suddenly selling a company just for money, and so that means that you're selling something you love, and so that might actually shorten your period of time for doing it. It doesn't actually mathematically make sense, apart from you got a bunch of money, but now you've stopped doing the thing that you love. So the thing that I really thought about long and hard was keeping hold of Hieatt before we started it, and I'd sort of arranged to have a phone call with Yvonne Chenard at Patagonia, because we'd done a bunch of stuff with him, and we came pretty close to maybe selling howies to Patagonia, but at the time Patagonia were needed to focus on Patagonia, but I sort of got the respect of Patagonia. I'd written a thing about a journey of a carrot from Poland to cardigan, which was completely and utterly one of the most boring pieces of copy I'd ever written, with every left turn, right turn, every roundabout, every way sign. It was insanely dull and boring, but it sort of inspired Patagonia to go and do footprint chronicles, and so to cut this story a little bit short, is I just wanted to have a chat with Yvonne, and I'd been sending him the Howies catalogs. The Howies catalogs became quite famous and collectible, and we'd built a company through words, really, and telling people what was important to us. And so I just asked him a question. I said, Yvonne, like, how did you keep hold of Patagonia? Because I didn't keep hold of Howies, and I want to make sure that I keep hold of it this time. And he thought about it, and he just said, well, it's like 40 years hard work. I went, thought so. And then he said, yeah, and 2 remortgages. And I'm going, yeah, thought so. And I think that's the beautiful quest, is if you've found something you want to do, and this is where purpose is actually, people can take purpose in the wrong way, and they just think purpose is just a nice veneer, a bit of brand washing, but in essence, the real core of purpose is you're doing something that gives you the highest energy. And because everything you do is a transfer of energy, and so when you feel it the most, you can transfer that energy to another human being, and you can do that through laughter, humor, like with passion. And so it's a transference of energy from you to another human being. But when you're operating as a human being from the highest form of energy, is you found your love. And so therefore, like, that's what purpose does, right? And you hope you're going to be successful, but grit, hope needs grit, and what keeps you going is the fact that you kind of want to do the thing that you love doing. The theory is that because you love doing it, you're going to get really good at it, like next level good. And that's the thing that actually allows you to keep doing it, because you're on another level compared to anyone else, because that's what love has allowed you to do. Love has allowed you to go and practice enough to get so ridiculously good that you can keep doing it for a long time. And I think for me, the saddest thing ever is when people go and build businesses and all they have is a 5-year plan, and then to go and sell it. And you're going, you just sold 5 years of your life for money. And because, by the way, you can make money from doing the stuff that you actually love, because you're actually going to be better than anyone else out there because you love doing it, because you'll just do it for longer and harder, and work will be play. So that notion of like deferred life plans because you're going to go and build a business that you don't actually care about is a denial of life. And the thing for you is, if you start thinking about what gives you energy and, you know, what makes you excited, is, don't you just want to do that? And don't you want to find a way to become so good at it you can always do it? And so that's really, it's not even that complicated, apart from people make it complicated because they chase other people's dreams. And that's the sadness sometimes with founders. They kind of climb mountains and they get up to a top of a mountain after 10 years and they just work out they've climbed the wrong mountain, and it's the saddest journey back down. Yes, peaks and valleys, right? So interesting.
There's so much in that. So I think it's I think it's Paul Graham who's got the Graham essays, who's got the do what feels like play to you but looks like work to others. I think it's something like that, and that's kind of why I went all in on this, because I'm kind of, I know we were talking before we hit record about how to slow down, but because I'm so obsessed with it, like it's very easy for me to do a 16-hour day, and it's not like gloating, but it doesn't feel like work. Like it's what I would do if it wasn't doing that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot in that for listeners. I think the other thing is, again, if I was to go back to when I started this podcast, I was like, right, the reason I'm doing this is to help people know how to sell their brand.
Sure.
I interviewed William Chase, who's the founder of Tyrrells, and he said, when you're in the winner's enclosure, you realize that all the fun was in the race. And that's a quote that's really stuck with me. And actually, probably one of the biggest things that I've unlearned is that selling the business is not something that's actually good. It's this false narrative that we've been, kind of infected with.
And I think that's a really great quote. I mean, Paul Graham is fantastic as well. I mean, but the thing is, like, because, like, don't get me wrong, like, when you start something, the odds are against you succeeding, like, a lot, right? So there's, for every 10 startups, maybe 2 or 3 succeed in the end, right? So that the odds are not good, but we're risk takers and we're willing to take the risk. And now there's 2 ways to look at things, and it's, you can go and succeed and you can have a miserable journey, and you've got to find a way as founders, even though there's fear and there's stress and there's self-doubt, is you've got to find a way to enjoy the ride. Because whether you get to the winning enclosure or you kind of take a fall, is either way, like, if you don't enjoy the ride, you're literally misspending time, because the ride is all of the thing, and actually the result is some of the thing, but it's not even as close to all the things you're ever going to remember. Are probably the hardest and toughest days, where you just go, oh my God, when you were really tested and somehow you got through it. And those, it didn't feel like it at the time, but those were the days. And then you think you're only going to have a great day when you win. That's so small amount of the time. Over a 10 or 15 year period, that one day where you suddenly, someone tells you, mostly probably through a big check, that you won, if that's the only day that you truly are happy, you got all these other days that you didn't enjoy the ride. And so, like, the thing for you, for your life, is to go and find a way to enjoy it and have belief in where you just go, like, and have so much belief that that you just keep doing it until there's a point where you just can't do it anymore. But even then you'll go again. But the key thing is to go, like, you gotta be true to yourself, and you just go, like, even the hardest days are still your days where you've made a choice to do that, and you just go, like, like, be resilient to it, and just accept it, and just go, like, find a way to look after yourself, find a way to switch off, find a way to get rest, but, like, ultimately play the long game. But it's your game. It is you. You've literally chosen this. Of all the things that you could do in your life, you've chosen this. So you might as well enjoy even the worst of days, because they're oddly the ones that you're just going to look back and laugh at. Just, could you remember where actually we did that product and it was absolutely shit and no one bought it, and we don't blame them. During those are the moments. Peak moments are when things go really well. Peak moments are when things go really badly. So the things that we remember are peak moments. So it's kind of like, enjoy the ride, because I mean, that's all you got.
What there's I want to go into in a sec. We'll hold that for a sec. But one thing I want to talk about is this purpose, because there'll be a lot of people listening to this who, as I said right at the beginning, they've got the great product, got the great packaging, but they haven't got the purpose. And I always sometimes think of categories like a music festival, right? And the bigger you got loads of different tents, i.e. loads of different brands, ramp up the music, the bigger the purpose, the louder the music, and people just gravitate towards that like a beacon, right? And reading your stuff is, and reading your work, when you kind of got it in that one sentence, which is like, get 400 people their jobs back in Cardigan. It's a story. Like, I suppose where I'm trying to go with this, David, is like, how do founders who've got the purpose in their soul, right? How do they transfer that into like an actual story? Like, are there any specific exercises they can do? Questions to ask themselves?
Well, I mean, I think in terms of brand storytelling is, I mean, imagine if you could just own one word. And it's actually a really good exercise, especially if you're writing, and I think all founders should write. And the thing is, like, because I teach founders like on some workshops, and the one thing I say, look, hey, there's a million distinct words, but you have to choose one, because your ability to go from unknown to known, like, relies on you being really clear about your voice, and actually, most founders, they kind of think, oh, I can't find my voice. Well, it's pretty easy. You already got it. It's just you haven't actually done the work on getting clear. And so if you can go and choose one word, it's kind of really, I do this triangle exercise, and it's kind of like, people just go, oh my God, that's incredible. You go, yeah. I mean, the reason Nike beat Adidas when they shouldn't have done, because Adidas had 40 years of, they were 40 years ahead. They had all the money, they had all the athletes, they had all the product, they had all the distribution. Nike shouldn't actually even be in the top 10. Apart from, they had a guy called Dan Wyden who allowed them to find the voice, and made sport an emotional thing, because it actually is an emotional thing. And so, like, a founder has to go and do the work on your voice. And if you can't find your voice, I can tell you this now, in a busy world, you're literally not going to stand out. And so, like, so I'm there going, well, it's pretty, the reason, like, people like Innocent and all those, like, stood out is because they found a voice, and it's a distinct voice, and it allows them to go from unknown to known in a busy world. And that's like, that's the work I would, if I was a founder right now, I'm just going, like, oh, what's the one thing that could really help me? Learn to write, like, and get quick at it. and get good at it, because great writing allows you to do great thinking. And if you can write things, and that could be about your ideas as well, is it allows you to communicate with your community. And that, a brand is really just a well-told story. Apart from most founders can't actually tell their story. You go, you're in the storytelling business, and you think you're in the making jam business. You go, don't get me wrong, the jam has to be good. It has to be the best in the world. But your ability to tell your story has to be as good, if not better, than your product.
I mean, my brain's kind of percolating with different ideas. So I think the first thing I want to kind of go back into and explore is this one word piece. Back to the analogy about kind of categories like music festivals almost, is I think brands can get stuck where they start looking, and so imagine going to a music festival and you've got kind of Oasis, I don't know, Stone Roses, and another Manchester band like Joy Division. They all sound very different, and you want them to sound different because they've found their unique voice. And I think what can happen is brands get insecure and they start trying to sound like someone else. So if you went to Oasis and he was trying to, and Liam Gallagher was trying to play like Ian Brown, you'd be a bit like, hang on a second, and it loses that oomph and that unique connection, that unique voice. With this word piece, like you said, there was that triangular thing. Like, how can people find their unique voice with this triangle? Because I think that could really help us.
Well, I mean, it's kind of an exercise. I mean, it's not overly complicated. It's just like people in, Adidas are still trying to find their voice, and it's the equivalent of when you have the handbrake stuck on your car and you're driving and you're going, it's not going very fast. You go, yeah, and actually finding the voice is releasing the handbrake. So to give you an example, if your listeners know, like, say, Brené Brown, like her one word could be vulnerability. You go like, go and own vulnerability, right? So, or Gary Vaynerchuk could own hustle, right? So it's like, what's the one word that you could go and like own? And the nuance with it is then you've got to go and build your and it's a triangle exercise, and at the top of it is your voice, and then at the bottom of it is your two characters, right? So for Nike it would be justified irreverence or grit, gonna make this shit happen, whatever. Do you mean so? And if you put like the top of Nike's thing would be empowerment, and then you put those two words at the bottom. In essence, that triangle allows you to go and be fully in charge of your voice, and to also brief anyone. Can look, hey, this is what we're about. And most brands never do that work because they don't actually know how to do it. But once you have, the reason like brands come out and just go, wow, okay, they discovered their voice early. And their ability to stand out is because they've found it. And a copycat bands, like nobody wants to be a copycat band. Everybody wants the real thing. And so I think it's important work for like founders to understand like how to cut through. And the great thing is, like you don't have a budget. You go, great. Because actually having a budget, and if you don't know your voice, is really scary, because you actually spend an awful lot of money and have no impact. It's like the voice is the difference between a blunt arrow and a sharp arrow. And you go, oh, I spent a lot of money, I didn't cut through. You go, yeah, because you actually don't actually know how to talk to another human being, so they actually feel something. And the voice allows you to, you want to always speak to the heart, because that's the biggest decision maker. And most brands speak to the head, and the heart makes most of the decisions.
It's the storytelling piece, and you are a very polished writer, and I want to. I mean, I write every day as well, and I want to explore. I've been doing it for yonks, but I would love to. We'll go into your kind of creative process in a sec, but storytelling is so important, and I think I don't know which book it's in, but there's the story of the guy in New York, the blind man in New York, and I think for listeners, this is a great example of how you've got the blunt arrow versus the sharp arrow, and I think and correct me if I've got this a little bit wrong, but there's basically a blind guy in New York, and he's trying to get some money basically, and then I think he changes the sign to "I am blind, it is spring," and that story is delicious, and it just realized, okay, well, the guy's blind at spring. Do you want to talk about that a bit? Because I think it's really interesting.
It's the context, right? So like, the sign says, basically, I'm blind, give me money. But then the sign got changed because, it's spring and I'm blind. So everybody could actually understand what it must be like to be blind when all these flowers are popping off and the color's incredible, and the bees are like out there, and so this person's missing out on all of that. So basically, great writing actually makes you feel something, and like for the other human being, and so it's just a really subtle change of words, but that's the beauty of being able to write, where you've got 26 letters just like everybody else, and your ability to rearrange them in the right order so another human being can actually feel something is going to separate you from, being unknown to known. And that's the beauty of it, right? So it's kind of like, it's, founders who can write actually do really well.
What is your writing process like then? Because I think I've read, it's somewhere I just find it interesting how everyone's got their own different kind of idiosyncrasies. Obviously, you've got a lot of books behind you there. What does your morning look like? When do you write? What does that look like?
Well, I think, I mean, it's a really interesting question, because like your ability to design your week is really important, because the one thing, like the founder is up against is basically busy, and busy is the most toughest, gnarliest, sneakiest opponent that any founder's ever going to have. And we've also got this notion of 20% of what we do actually matters, and the 80% doesn't matter at all. And so, and letting go of that 80% is going to be your ability to concentrate on the 20%. And so in terms of writing and the reason I say this is, in a way, the way most people isn't working, and not in terms of a brain science point of view. And so what I'm trying to do, and this is like an ongoing practice, is to, I'll work on myself, for the first hour, first 2 hours. I mean, I'll go either sea swimming, I'll do some exercise, I'll do some meditation, and all that stuff. That's just kind of like just a bit of movement, meditation, movement. You go, actually, the founder has to look after the founder, because the founder's looking after everybody else. And so what I'm trying to do is to work in 2-hour blocks. So, company 1, 2-hour block, and then 2 hours not do anything, and then 2-hour block, then an hour not do anything, and then the last hour of the day is, creative writing. Because I always used to like start my writing in when I had the most energy. But actually, in terms of creative writing, it's actually really good to do your creative writing when you're a little bit tired, because, the barriers that you would, have in terms of resistance to like maybe a dumb idea, you think, oh, that's a really dumb idea. The resistance is actually really low when you're tired, and you just go, maybe it's good, maybe it's not. So actually writing when you're tired is a little bit good for creativity. So, but I think like the hard thing for everybody is we're kind of not doing any really deep work anywhere, and we're trying to multitask, and it's an absolute incredible, awful lie. So if you want to actually do the whole reason to say all this is like, if you want to go and increase your influence, it's about quality. And it's the quality of thinking, the quality of creativity, is the quality of writing, whichever quality you're chasing. So in order to get that, you have to block out time in order to focus on things. You don't actually need to work harder and longer. Is you need to be more focused, and you need to get rid of all that other shit that doesn't matter. And by the way, busy is a sneaky little shit. And it's tempting to, stay in busy, because being busy is actually easier than thinking.
Sorry.
Oh, go on.
I was almost this busy narrative, to bring it back to the speedboat versus shipliner, is the shipliners with loads of people, super busy, loads of just meetings about meetings, whereas I think the speedboat, it allows you to go deep work, go in deep and move quick.
Look, and the thing is that, with the speedboat is there's no passengers. Like, you're on there and you have to hang on. But like on an ocean liner, like there's loads of passengers on an ocean liner. And I'm not just saying passengers as in passengers. I'm going, the people working on the ship, they're like half steam ahead. Do you mean, like, they're not really, busting their heads to do the best work they've ever done. But on a speedboat, everybody's there, has to play a role. And that's what I kind of mean by the no passenger thing, is everyone's there, we're going all in the same direction, and we're going very fast, and everybody has a job to do. That's kind of really interesting. I think in terms of your listeners is like, be really discerning with your time, and the tendency, the reason people go to overwhelm is they try and do too much. They try and, like, oh, I'm going to be on 7 social media platforms. Try one. Like, try actually, punching really hard on one, and just have a singular focus. Try and do less, but make it mean more. And that's how you go and 10x your influence in this world. Where you go and, you go and write something, and people just go, "Oh my God, that really did matter."
I love that, and I want to talk. There's a picture on your website, and it says "Made in Wales" of the jeans. It's got a beautiful coastline. I was down in Cornwall 2 weeks ago, and it started getting me thinking about the sea and creativity. And I think there's so many parallels between the sea and creativity. I mean, weirdly, I think creativity's been here since the beginning of time and will be here till the end of time. So's the sea. Do you know what I mean? When the pyramids were getting built, the waves were crashing against the sea. Longer after I'm gone, longer after you're gone, the new innovations, they'll still be the sea. It's just this, I think creativity is a flow. Obviously, the sea flows. Creativity is kind of dangerous. The sea is kind of dangerous. I think there's lots of parallels. You talked about earlier, David, about doing these sea dips with your mate. Like, how does being by the sea, being in the West, I think you've got a quote which says innovation happens at the edges. Like, how does the sea make you more creative and 10x your creativity?
I think the reason I kind of did the sea swims for a year and a half, almost every day. I mean, and it's brutal, and it's like there's ice on the sand. Do you mean it's kind of cold? And
yeah.
But the interesting for me was, I don't really like the cold, and I'm not that good a swimmer, and I'm not like a surfer, like going, I'm born for the sea. But it really got me doing hard things first thing, and I'm going, oh, and it was never easy. It didn't get any easier the more we did it. It was like always hard for that moment you're going in, and I kind of like really liked it, where you just go, like, you felt this freshness when you came out, and whether there was a reset, and you suddenly come out and you were ready to do, if you were ready to do the work that mattered most to you that day, it sort of got you ready. And I think when you're suddenly concentrating so much on like how cold it is, it's like, oh my God, it's like, it's bonkers cold. Then you've done hard things then, and then there's a reset of like, well, all I got to do is try and solve this problem. And so, and what it does in terms of creativity is it just gets you to understand like solving problems is actually kind of fun. And it is good to do hard things. And the reason you will go and succeed is because you can do hard things when other people can only do easy things. And really what creativity is see something that from a set of data that no one else has seen, and you put it in a form where suddenly people can go, oh my God, I didn't actually see that, but you did. And that's a hard thing. But you can only do your best work when you have a clear head and not a busy head. And that's why we have to defeat busy, because otherwise you will not win. You will not have your best ideas. A busy head gives you shallow ideas. And that's why we've got to like be really, really intentional on our time, on our energy, and what we say yes to and what we say no to.
I can completely get what you're saying with the founder and almost rebending time, which is what you've got when you kind of escape busy. When you're building the team at Hiut Denim, and there's people who expect to come into work at 9, or I don't. That's what I want to explore with you. But when there is this kind of schedule further down or further across the hierarchy, how do you get people in your team to not be busy so they can do their best work?
And look, the truth is that this is a daily battle. And
yeah.
And just because we know the problem doesn't mean we always practice the solution. But what it really comes down to is focus. And I did this really great exercise, and it was one of the meetings where everyone just went, okay. And I asked, really two simple questions: is what could we do to grow our business by 10%? And there was 50 answers. And they go, no, we could do this and we could do that. And I go, oh, okay, whatever. And so now, what are the things that we could do to 10x our business? And the answer was only two things. One was like go and, get our website to do some of the things that it's not currently able to do. Like that would 10x the business if we could suddenly tell you what your fit of gene is in 60 seconds. We would 10x our business. The other one is to have more influence in the world. And how do you have more influence is to have better ideas. So there was only really two things that we could do to go and 10x our business. Whereas if we wanted 10% our business, there was hundreds of things. And so really the busyness and how to defeat it is really what is focus and what is busy. And so you've got to be able to let go of some things where you just go, can we just let go of that? And by the way, some of these things you're going to have to let go of, you might have been doing for a long time. And it's pretty hard. And the team, like we've got a really small team. And there is a tendency even now that, to chase after busy work as important, as opposed to, the important work. And how much you are in your impact zone versus busy zone will actually decide your future. And it's this is the work that every founder has to do.
I think what you've said there about, busy head gives you shallow ideas, and busy zone versus impact zone. It's just, as you say, there's no exact science to this, and there's, as you see, what was, I think, really reassuring is the problem, but doing that on an organizational level is really tricky, because more people inherently baked into that equals busy. So it's just interesting. This is a question I ask quite a lot of guests, is what would you say in one sentence is creativity to you? What is your definition of creativity?
I mean, not following.
Two words. Perfect.
I mean, it's not following others. It's kind of like, it's a pretty good metric.
And there are specific examples of that. So I read a couple, listened to a couple of your talks you did, and I think there was some. I think it was the example of the back pocket in the jean with like the. Are there, like, I want to add some more color to this. Are there examples of these idea machines?
I think it's like if we go back to the ocean line and the speedboat, it's like the ocean line carries on with the formula and doesn't want to actually make any change materially. So like a 5-pocket Western jean hasn't actually changed in 140 years. I mean, the most innovative day was when Mr. Davis had an idea for like a rivet. So that was the end of innovation. Like same number of legs, but there's a coin pocket on the 5-pocket jean, which was for when you had like a watch, like on a chain. And so they invented that pocket so you wouldn't lose the watch on your chain. So it's like, well, now we're not even wearing watches really, apart from Apple watches. So it's kind of redundant. And it's like no one even actually knows why it's there in the first place. And all we've done is gone, well, can we redesign it so like you can put your AirPods in it? And so you suddenly go, well, okay. And people go, oh, it's got to be a bit wider, it's got to be this. You go, like, it's literally not even a big idea, apart from like no one is actually doing it. So they're quite happy having a pocket that makes no sense, apart from 140 years ago when you were worried about losing your pocket watch. And so I think it's just like a big idea can actually be quite small, where you suddenly go, oh, okay, is that a big idea? You go, well, yeah, apart from no one else is doing it, it's fine. But people have accepted that's the way it is. Like I'm going, oh, why do we have that pocket there? It doesn't make any sense, and there's no use to it, and you can't even put your fingers in it. And then suddenly, if you then go AirPods, which are like, like I was kind of reading the other day, like if they were, the AirPod business is bigger than some massive companies, and people go, it's a big thing. Everyone has them, and now you suddenly, well, you can put them in our jeans. You go, yeah, it's not, it ain't rocket science. I mean, it's just like, but no one else is doing it.
There's a simplicity to it as well, as what I think I'm picking up from you, David. Which I think the impact simplicity equals impact, and that's a really simple idea with big impact. But going back to this busy thing, if you've got a busy head, you've kind of got shallow things. You just almost like you can't see those simple things. I don't know. Someone was saying to me, is like the answer's right in front of you. I don't know. There's a quote. I don't know where it was a podcast I think I was listening to. It's like, the answer is literally right in front of you. Sometimes it's just we're so busy with notifications and all this shit that it's hard to see through it.
I mean, in order for us to like really try and win, is we're going to have to defeat, this thing about attention. And so like, if you want really great ideas, I mean, the reason I actually really admire James Dyson was he walked past the timber yard, and he saw a centrifugal device, and anyone could have like walked past the timber yard and gone, hey, what does that actually mean? But he went, why do they use that thing? Oh, it must be the most efficient way to get dust out of a really dusty environment. What if I put that in a, if I use the word Hoover, you'd probably like sue me. But like if I put that a small thing and actually, kind of made that the Dyson, but that idea was there, but he observed it, because the observer muscle in the founder has to be extremely large, and the danger is like everyone's just scrolling on their phones and they're not observing things that are actually there, going, hey, there's the answer, and you just walk past it, but you were too busy scrolling, and like we are problem solvers, but if we don't actually understand even what the problem is, then we can't solve it. And so we've got to get our attention back from a busy world, and we got these incredible machines. Dopamine factory is called iPhones, and then suddenly go like, and we need we need the ego stroked every 2 minutes about how important we are, and therefore we don't actually solve problems, and so like we've got to have the quiet time in order to just go, well, what does that actually mean? And you will have your best ideas very far from a computer and very far from a phone.
Yeah, there's I think it was by John Lennon, who talks about a day of doing nothing. Like all the creativity comes from a day of doing nothing. I don't know, the quotes escape me, but they're one of my favorite bands. I kind of wax lyrical about them, but there's the ability to kind of pause and do nothing and then attack with speed and intensity. I want to talk about inputs versus outputs. And it kind of goes to what you were just saying just then, is like innovation doesn't happen on your phone, or like, so kind of creativity doesn't happen from your phone, or like, in the office, it comes from kind of weird ancillary places. And I think you've said in outputs are directly related to inputs. We need to subscribe to magazines we've never been to, need to go to places we never normally go to, eat at places that aren't our place. What, as we were talking before we hit record, is what is one or two books that you've kind of, I'm asking for my own kind of, I'll probably go and buy them, right? But what are one or two books that didn't really speak to your soul first time you read them, and then second, third time you were like, wow? So for me, I could not get my head round Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb first time. There's about 2-3 years ago, but then second time I was like, wow, that was incredible, because I think it's quite an interesting lens to explore.
Yeah, well, I think the notion of like for creativity is to try and put things odd things together, and so essentially 1 + 1 = 3, but you've got to be aware of odd things, and if you go looking where everyone else is looking, you're going to go and find what everyone else is finding, and so it's not going to be that different to what else is out there, and industries tend to do that. They tend to gather together, read together, podcast together, and actually what you need really to have different viewpoints is to put lots of things together in a melting pot in order for you to have different outputs, and so like I think that's really important. I mean, I spent an hour the other day listening to a gaming podcast. I have no interest in gaming at all, but it was just going, I wonder how they think, and I think for founders is you have to go and do that stuff, but if you stay in your lane or you stay in your industry, you kind of start thinking like your industry does, and I think that's a challenge. In terms of books, like, I mean, it's a good question, and I don't really have a book that I struggled with first time, and then second time I really went, wow, okay. I kind of love books, and the challenge for all of us is that we're on the thirst of knowledge, right? So we crave knowledge, and especially as founders, we're on this personal development accelerated program. We can't get enough information. Apart from that, means sometimes that we are more respectful of speed and quantity than quality. And so, like, if this year you said, I'm just going to read 5 books, and I'm going to read them again and again and again until I actually understand them. And so like, because I speak to a lot of people and they go, yeah, I read a book, I literally can't even remember what was in there. And so our retention of ideas and knowledge isn't as good as it should be. And rather than reading more and more books, is we should read less and have more retention. And that means reading a book in a different way. That means reading it with a pen, doing, as Tiago Forte says, like, progressive summarization, where you suddenly go, what does that mean? How does that mean? What does that mean? And then suddenly you go, oh, okay. And we're on a quest for more and more. And actually, if you picked 10 incredible books and actually read them until you totally and utterly understood them on another level, it'd probably be enough. And as opposed to more.
What for you? What would you say are some of those books that could get our, founders listening to this to kind of not follow, to be different? Maybe some of the weirder books. I quite like weird books. I enjoy them. I'll read them.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like a bunch of weird books, but like, I mean, like, I think Sun Tzu, Art of War, still incredible book, bonkers but brilliant. But also, like, things like, Naval Ravikant, the Almanac. In terms of writing, it's insane. But I like books where it really gets you to really think about things in quite a different way, and so there could be, like, there's a new book about writing called Smart Brevity. I think that's pretty insane. But there's so many amazing books. But like, the thing is, what we don't do, and we talked about this at the start, was actually rereading them to actually really understand them. I think the first time you read them, and the second time you begin to understand them, and the third time you start to actually understand exactly what they're talking about. And at that point, I think, then you just go, I think sometimes we're on a quest for more knowledge, but what we should be is on a quest for more retention of the knowledge. So it's kind of like not more books, but more retention of the books that you should be reading.
It's almost, again, back to this busy piece. More books equals shallow and busy.
Yeah.
Less books equals kind of narrow and deep. And I think that's really reassuring for me. In terms of, I want to go into the early days of the Do lectures, and I think obviously now, as you said, you keep it at 100 people, you keep it small. I think you said somewhere that scale kind of kills magic, which I love. But you also said that the tickets didn't just go fucking selling like hotcakes. That there was that real moment of just grit, and almost as Paul Graham says, the trough of sorrow. Do you know what I mean? Like, what was that like the first two years? What did that feel like?
It's like, everybody wants to look at you and go, oh, that's now successful. All right, so selling tickets in the 1 hour on one day, all the tickets with a wait list. But it wasn't like that in the beginning. We couldn't sell tickets, even though we were selling tickets at a loss each time, because we didn't actually know what we were doing. And the your ability to keep going when the data doesn't actually give you evidence that you should keep going means there's something there and you don't know what it is quite yet, but you know there's something there. And it fills you and fuels you in ways that you can't quite describe to loved ones or your mom, but you just go, why do you keep doing this thing? And the thing that I've done, which I don't particularly say is a good thing, but it's something that we've had to do. Where with Howies, we started it in '95 and we got our first paycheck in 2001, and so, but we had belief, and we just knew there was something there, and we couldn't quite. When you won't quit on something, it's quite interesting because why won't you quit? Because all the data says that you should. And I think that's a really interesting experience where you suddenly go, and so you went 6 years without getting a salary, and actually with the Do Lectures we went 10 years without getting a salary, and people go, why would you carry on doing that? It doesn't make any sense or money, apart from it kind of does now. And we had like a 1.2 billion pound events company going, hey, we'd like to buy it, and we said, oh no, it's kind of, we're flattered, and it was kind of nice, and we went and had a chat, and they did a term sheet, and in the end we just said, hey, I think we sort of worked out there's a really great, beautiful business here, and we're enjoying it, and now isn't the time to sell. And so we didn't actually look at the term sheet, so we never found out what the offer was. And they just said, oh, don't you want to know what the offer is? I'm going to definitely don't want to know the offer, because that thing of like, there's obviously something there for us that fuels us. And now it is actually a really beautiful business that's in the business of actually helping people. And you go, that's a really nice business to be in. And actually 100-person event is, I wanted to scale it at the beginning. I wanted every way I could possibly to scale it. But in the end, I couldn't, because the barn couldn't get any planning permission. It couldn't actually get any bigger. So I was helped by, planning, because I would have scaled it. And actually the best thing about it now is it's only 100 people. And so I was saved by the planning officer.
It's a great story. So a lot of people listening to this actually listen to this podcast because of that beginning bit, when the data says give up, your friends say, what are you doing, mate? But there's some weird ethereal part of your soul that tells you to kind of keep bludgeoning your way forward. But specifically, like, how did you actually get the tickets to the first event sold, and what did that first event look like?
Well, obviously we didn't even have a website. We were just we were hustling, and people bought tickets even though they knew they couldn't come, because they just gone, we just want this thing to exist. And you think, wow, that's incredible. And so there was a lot of hustle. And I think, in the first year, 2 years, 3 years, is you're going to have to push. You're going to have to push like crazy in order for the world to, you've got to go on that journey, from unknown to known. And the invisible wall is, you've got to go and climb it. And you only climb it through, your ability to go and tell the story and being clear with that voice. And that's the only way you're going to go and scale that invisible wall. And I think, the interesting thing about not paying yourself for like a 10-year period is you don't have any investors, and you don't and suddenly you don't have any meaningful debt. And so suddenly what that has brought you is incredible freedom to go, where do we want to go with this thing? As opposed to someone telling you, we need to go and do this. And so that restraint and that grit allows you the freedom in the end to go, yeah, where should we go and play with this? This thing's pretty interesting. And that's a beautiful place. I'm not saying that's for everybody, and I'm not saying that was a path I would recommend. I'm just saying that was the path that we took, and there are benefits to that path. I'm not saying it's an easy path at all. But that grit is an interesting one on the journey, where, and hope does need grit.
Hope does need grit. I love that. That's a beautiful sentence. Where I kind of completely understand everything, and I get everything you're saying in terms of. So I've interviewed a few Michelin star chefs on this podcast,
right.
And I actually went up because I just find chefs fascinating. I don't know if you know René's Redzepi. Do you know Tommy Banks? He's got a restaurant up in. He's a really interesting guy, but he's got a restaurant up in Oldstead, which is about an hour on from Leeds. And I went up there the other day to interview him. And back to what you were saying about this. You can create lots of magic when it's a small restaurant, but in between the pork course, they'd had this. They came out with these almost like these knives, and they were like almost like choose your weapon, right? It was a beautiful piece of storytelling and a great reframe. But the knives were all filled with things that had been foraged from the surrounding fields, and their whole ethos is we grow everything and we forage. So it's a brilliant piece of storytelling. Cost them kind of bugger all other than the cost of the knives, but created a really piece of remarkable magic that I'm telling you right now, and I've told all my friends about. I posted it on social media. What were the little things you focused on, like in those first couple of events that created the magic? Because I think the magic's lots of little things done well. I don't know whether you agree with that.
No, it's like how people remember is like the question that has to almost come before that question, and so how do people remember? And there's a beautiful story from a film called I think it's Mystery Train by Jim Jarmusch, and it really tells you how people remember. And so there was two Elvis fans who lived in Japan, and they saved up for years in order to go to Graceland, and they flew over and they got this crummy little motel, stayed there, but the next morning they got up super early and they took the tour of Graceland, and they were both open mouthed, and and you suddenly go, and they just were just gobsmacked, and they just gone on. They were such Elvis fans, and then they went back to their motel after the Graceland trip, and the guy got his camera, which had been on his neck all day, and he started taking photographs of the curtains and the threadbare rug and the leaking taps. And his girlfriend said, "What are you doing? You didn't take a single photograph all day." He said, "Yeah, but I'm never going to forget today. But it's these crummy average things I'm going to forget when I shut the door when we leave tomorrow." And so that's how people remember, right? So we remember the remarkable and we forget average. And so whatever you're doing, whether it's brand building, doing events, is you have to go and understand that's how people remember. They remember peak moments. So if people are arriving at the Do lectures and they get off the train and there's a lady there holding a sign, "The end of normal," you're probably going to remember it. But it's just a sign. And so
but it's so good. It's so good though, David.
But it's suddenly they're going. So your job is, whether you're doing events or doing brands, is to understand, is people actually forget almost everything apart from the stuff that they remember. Why do they remember it? It's because it's a peak moment. And then once you understand that, you suddenly go, well, I can go and build my event, understanding, the arrival's pretty important, the departure's pretty important, and somewhere in between is pretty important. And so engineering something for a peak moment that's how you do it, right? You suddenly go, right, okay, where's our peak moment? Okay, how do you want to design it? How do you want to engineer it?
how do you get? Because I don't know if you know a guy called Rory Sutherland, who's he was at Ogilvy. He's been on the podcast, and we were talking about this, and he was saying one of the exercises people can do to think about these small moments is hotels are very good at getting the check-in experience great, but not very many people are getting the check-out experience great. It's kind of like you're just, get in your car and fuck off kind of thing. I'd love to know, like, how do you make that end part, that end peak magical for guests?
I mean, it's a good point because actually, last year was our first year doing it after like 2+ years of COVID and stuff, and actually we'd sort of forgotten how important the end point was, and it sort of fizzled out, and you should never let it fizzle out. And so one of the things that we're engineering this time round is to make sure it's not a fizzle and it goes out with a big bang. And so one of the things that we're doing is we're having a room where it's just candles. You go in before you leave, and you're on your own, and you have to go and write a letter to yourself, and just this is what I want to leave on the farm. I want to leave this behind, and so it's one of the things you want to leave behind. And so, the room is called Last Rites, and so then they put the envelope and they put it on the fire, but they also have an envelope. We're going, but this is what I want to take away with me. And they write that letter. So there's 2 letters. And again, all these things, they're not expensive. They're just understanding where you are in that exact moment and what's important to you and what's not. And what's important to you is you want to leave something. You've come and found something, and the barrier that's been stopping you want to leave that behind. And then what you want to take it home with you is this new thought that you go, I'm going to go and do this. And so those 2 letter moments is kind of really important, but the burning is a symbolic nature because, and being in the candle room, and it's called Last Rites, is literally, but you're on your own, and the smell is incredible, and the feel is incredible, and it's an old barn right now. I looked at it this morning, and it's really shitty. But by the time they arrive, it's going to be incredible. But it doesn't cost money. But like all these things, it's always about how much thought you put into it, and what is the conversation that's going on in the attendee's head at that moment.
I completely agree. And one of the things Tommy had actually done in his restaurant is, say you're putting a chair in like this. So say this is the table, you put the chair in that way. He'd actually just turned the chair like that to a slight angle, and he walked in and the whole thing felt different. And he was telling me about this magic. It literally cost him £0 to go like that. And you walked into his dining room and it felt, I was like, why has no one ever else? Well, I hadn't seen anyone else do that. And I love these things. As a challenger brand, you don't have the money, you don't have the budget, but my God, you've got creativity. And the storytelling through the end letter and the opening, the letters is brilliant. Conscious of time,
yeah.
So I just want to kind of go a few more things I want to explore, but I'm really enjoying this. So Danny Meyer, or Meyer, I don't know the best to say it. He's got a quote which was on your on that presentation. On that quotes that changed my life. I think. Constant gentle pressure.
Yeah.
And weirdly, I interviewed, I don't know if when you were living in London, if Caravan Coffee was around.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know Caravan? Yeah. So I interviewed them the other day, Laura and Chris, and they live by that mantra actually of this kind of constant gentle pressure. And then weirdly, I interviewed a chef called Greg Marchand, who's got a really good story. He's actually lost both his parents tragically in a car crash. Grew up in a French orphanage, and is now, he ended up working under Danny Meyer at I think it's Gramercy Tavern. I think it's in New York. I don't know.
Yeah.
And he was telling me a lot about Danny Meyer and some of the principles he's got. And one of his things was this with hiring. He said 2 things to me that really struck a chord. One was like the eyes don't lie, was the first thing. And we were sat above Covent Garden. He was like looking at me right in the eye. I was like, this is a bit intense. And then the other thing was this 49 and 51%. So I think what Danny Mayer says is I may have got this slightly wrong, but my interpretation is that you want someone who's got 50%, 51%, and the kind of the 49% you can kind of teach them. Is kind of what Greg was telling me, and he was like his whole process is get that 51% right, and then we can teach you the rest.
Yeah.
And in terms of, we were talking about passengers and not having passengers on the speedboat. How do you hire people? And maybe we could like talk about Danny Mayer's 49 and 51%. Like, what's the 51% you look for?
I mean, it's kind of interesting because obviously down in terms of the factory is because they've done it for like 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, even 50,000 hours. Like, you can't actually teach them how to make a jean because they already know. And so the Danny Mayer thing is kind of really, and I give his book out to people when I kind of, especially for the do lectures where you go, hey, go and read this book. Setting the Table is incredible. Because the thing of the 51% and the 49% is understanding what you can train for and what you can't. And so you can't really train for to like human beings if you don't. You can't train for like having a great sense of humor if you don't. Like, you can't train for integrity if you don't have it. And it's all those things which are untrainable, and the rest is just capabilities. And so you go, so the notion, especially in hospitality, is like, do they actually like human beings? Kind of important. And because ain't gonna train for that, if they don't. Or are they gonna make a problem worse or less worse, like by worrying about it? And so the untrainable versus the trainable is like, you should always hire for the bits that you can't train. That's essential. And the things that they need training on, that's kind of easy because it's just training. And like for us in the factory then is, especially upstairs, is you want to go and hire for hunger. Because if they don't have hunger, I am not going to train them it. And so like for anyone listening is you should always hire for hunger and you should train for capabilities. And because capabilities can be trained, but hunger can't be. If they don't have it, they're almost never going to get it. And so you want to be around that hunger. Otherwise, from an energy point of view, is all your energy is going to go to trying to give people without energy some energy, and it's their job to give themselves energy. You want self-drivers, and so you kind of you gotta, like, in order to succeed, you have to go and like be really good at hiring the right people. Otherwise, you'll spend all your time trying to get rid of the wrong people. And it's not fun, and it's not nice, and in essence, you want to, you never want to like drop your standards, because they can't meet yours, and so like you go, that's not a good thing, and you want them to raise their standard to your standard, assuming that your standard is high, so. You've got to be slow to hire because you want to go and find that right person.
And how do you like test hunger in someone? Is that a gut decision, or
it'll kind of reveal
test?
Itself.
Like, how do you?
It will reveal itself in some way, and then normally they could be slightly obsessive about some sport. They could have some really unusual hobbies, or they'll just when you ask them like what podcasts they listen to, probably list 100 or books. But if they, if they don't have any of those things, you suddenly go, I'd be super cautious, because you go, you just got like somebody who just wants a job. So, but you've got to go and use your instinct, and you've got to do the interviews, and you suddenly go like, yeah, I think they're really, it does get revealed at some point, either through hobbies, either through like sort of like sport, or like music, or there'll be some kind of demonstration of passion, which is a demonstration of hunger.
Right, I'm with you. And then I was listening to Danny Mayer actually recently on Tim Ferriss, and it was a really, really good conversation. And I didn't realize how much Seth Godin, I didn't realize they were such good mates, Seth Godin and Danny Mayer. I didn't realize that.
I didn't know.
But Danny Mayer talks about there's like 3 types of competitive. So you've got kind of the Muhammad Ali, which is I want to beat someone, I want to be like I've won, victorious. Then you've got the John McEnroe, which is I just can't lose. And then you've got the Usain Bolt, which is kind of like you've got to be better than yourself. And Danny Mayer actually looked for this in employees, and I'd love to kind of know, like, out of those buckets, like what kind of competitiveness are you? Because I think I could, I'll start with that. I think is the first bit.
I mean, if you're talking about founders, you're in the ultimate battle of you versus you. The brave you versus the lazy you. And that's always going to be the battle. Do you mean so? Like, and it's like the you that wants to be great and the you that wants to be good. So you are always going to be up against that, and so that's never going to go away. And so some people settle. They do actually drop anchor at some point. But the best people I've seen never lose the hunger to go and try and see what else they can achieve with their potential. And so that potential, your human potential, is ultimately, as a founder, you want to go and achieve your human potential. And that means pushing you, to defeat the lazy you, or the I want to settle you, or I'm happy to be, okay you, versus the I want to be great at this thing. I want to do the best work I've ever done. You. And so the battle of you versus you is the ultimate battle for the founder. And then in terms of the 3 classifications, in terms of Danny's thesis, is, like I'm battling, like me against me. And so like I'm not like, because ultimately, all you can ask is you play to the top of your game. And if you start comparing yourself to pretty much everybody else, ultimately, are you reaching your potential with your gifts and your energy and your ideas? And if you reach your potential, you can't actually ask for more than that, because you've reached your optimum. And I think if you're comparing yourself to others, that's a tough game, because they might have different stories, different abilities. But if you are beating you versus you and you win that battle, it's the ultimate game.
For sure. And what I want to, you've kind of teed me up perfectly for my final bit I want to explore is completely agree. So mine is definitely more me versus me, basically, which is great. And I know a lot of people a lot of creative people I've interviewed, and a lot of successful people have a really harsh inner critic. And it's not everyone, but a lot of people do. And I think it's a great thing to help you get better than you, to get you in the sea in the morning, to get you writing, to get you doing. But one of the guests you've had at one of the lectures, Duke Stamp, is one of his quotes was, it's become a courageous act to love who you are. I suppose I'm asking this personally because I've got a really kind of mendacious little thug that sort of roams around my head sometimes. You just say you're not doing enough, you're not doing enough. Like, what's your relationship with your inner critic like?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like an ongoing thing, right? So at some point we need to get a better friend, and like, because actually, if you think about this, the inner critic, like, who needs a best friend like that? Is never says anything nice. It's always beating ourselves up. It's always like, misusing imagination for worry, and so at some point you have to go, hey, do you know what, you did your best there, and by the way, it didn't work, but you did your best. I'm proud of you, and you've got to find a way to go and be your best champion. And because if you are your worst critic, yes, it's gonna help you, push you, but ultimately is you kind of, flowers bloom in the sunshine, and so like you kind of, you don't want to tell yourself like a mistruth and saying, hey, you did really good when you didn't, but you also want to go, hey, I'm sort of proud of you. You did good. Like you did good work there, and well done. And so at some point you have to pat yourself on the back as well, and because if it's only a one-dimensional game of the person in the loop is only just beating myself up and telling me what I'm shit at, that's not really that helpful, and so you kind of want to be a bit kinder to yourself at some point. Doesn't mean you can go forgive like not trying or whatever. That's not really the point. Is at some point you say, hey, do you know what? I'm proud of you. I can see you tried, you busted your ass to make that happen, and maybe it didn't quite work out as you want, but I'm proud of you for doing the work, and then you go, okay. So be a bit kinder to yourself, because like you got to enjoy the bloody ride. I mean, it's hard enough anyway. You got all those haters out there anyway. Like, none of them are going to come to your funerals, but they're quite happy to tell you how shit you are. And so you need to have a friend upstairs going, hey, I'm really proud of you. Good job. Well done. I'll see you tomorrow. Get some sleep.
Yeah, that's what I need. I need to pertain to that. And the final thing, and I want to explore with you and ask you is there's a post I think you wrote on Twitter which ended with "Stay crazy." I don't know. I've done quite a bit, so I can't remember where it was. But I think what we've said there right at the beginning about when you don't follow, when creativity is not following, when I think by not following you can be the speedboat that finds almost like the blue waters and the blue oceans. How are you crazy? And I mean this in a positive way. And like, how do you stay crazy? How do you make sure you stay crazy?
Well, I mean, it's part of the practice, is that thing of like, if you drop anchor and you stick to your formula, and I mean, the danger for a formula is you found something that's suddenly worked and it's helped you cut through, but in order to find that formula, you did so many mistakes, you did so many errors, you did so many things that didn't like help you take the step forward. But all of those things got you to find your formula. And then when you stick and drop anchor and you stay with the formula, is you stop doing all the things that got you to being interested in the first place. And so you settle. And settling is dangerous. And so that thing of going to find your formula, have an easy year if you must, but like then go and start iterating again. And that thing of like never settling is the practice. And because otherwise what happens with the formula, and it's a trap, is it will work and work and work until one day it completely doesn't. And because you stopped doing all the iterations that got you there in the first place, is you don't have a plan B, and somebody's taken plan A away, and you go, So the mindset of staying curious is actually staying open to new ways. And that's called creativity. It's like, go and try some stuff that you've never done before. Fine.
David, I've honestly absolutely loved that. It's been so much fun, and yeah, my brain's just got all these just new ways of seeing and thinking of things. And I think one of the things you kind of said towards the end is misusing imagination for worry. And I was like, oh my God, I should get that tattooed on my arm, because I think a lot of when I start getting curious, a lot of my worry sort of dissipates into the ether. But yeah, look, I've thoroughly loved that. I think listeners need to go and grab both your books. Well, multiple books. Check out the newsletter. And, buy some jeans. Thank you.